A topic that comes up a lot when people contact our center, the Northampton Center for Couples Therapy, is about narcissism. It's actually not uncommon for me to talk to somebody who's inquiring about our services and have someone say to me, you know, I've been reading online, Kerry, and I've been reading about narcissism, and I'm worried that I'm married to somebody who has a narcissistic personality disorder. This actually is, you wouldn't believe how often people are wondering about it. And I think it's a particularly poignant question because it speaks to, I think, normal fears that a lot of us have in relationship about whether or not we're with somebody who sees us, whether or not we're with somebody who loves us, and it speaks to not feeling heard. So it's a particularly painful experience to have if you're having this in your partnership. Narcissism's become a really hot topic in the press lately and online. And I think, unfortunately, as a result of that, the term gets overused and diluted and starts to lose its meaning. So before I answer your question about whether or not you're partnered with somebody who's a narcissist, I just want to speak a little bit about what narcissism is and where the concept comes from. So you may be familiar with the Greek myth of Narcissist. It's one of the best known myths out there. And it's about this really strapping young lad, muscly, handsome guy whose name is a narcissist. And he's totally in love with himself. He doesn't really see anybody else. And there's another character in the myth who's lesser known, but is a really important character. And her name is Echo. And Echo is a nymph who one day is outside and she sees Narcissus walking by and she falls madly in love with him. And she starts to call out to him. He can't see her, but she calls out to him and she's saying, you know, various things. And everything she's saying is just bouncing back to her. Nothing she's saying he's hearing. And so then she decides that she'll reveal herself. And she steps out of the trees and, you know, before him. And Narcissus just looks right past her. He doesn't see her. And he rejects her. And Echo is utterly brokenhearted. She retreats to the lonely valleys in the landscape where she lives, and as legend goes, over time she just diminishes to nothing but the sound of her voice, an echo. I think to be in relationship with somebody who's struggling with severe narcissism and narcissistic injuries is to, in many ways, be Echo. And I think this myth is particularly great because it really cautions us. It speaks to two things that we have to be wary of. The first is that, to be in a relationship with somebody who's narcissistic is to be in a one-sided relationship. Stan Tatkin calls that a one-person system, and what it's really indicative of is a system where there's not mutuality, there's not equal regard given to each person's experiences, and it's very much directed from one person down to the next. But the other thing that the myth of Narcissus and the legend of Echo cautions us about is it speaks to really the cost of living a life long term in a relationship with somebody who can't see us, that we become a shadow of ourselves, a wisp of who we were in many ways, and just kind of fade away. And I don't think many of us, I would venture to guess most of us, want a life like that. So it's tricky though, right? It's not as simple as, well, somebody's a narcissist or they're not, and you stay or you leave. Because the thing is that narcissism at its root actually has a component of health to it. In order for us to have a sense of self and to sort out our own opinions and to take stands where we need to. We actually have to have a certain amount of narcissism in order to really thrive in the world. So it's an important quality to have in certain doses. And I actually heard somebody say once that people who struggle with severe narcissism actually are people who don't have enough narcissism. They actually, but to clarify, it's that they don't have enough healthy narcissism, that within them what they're struggling with is not feeling good enough about themselves. So your partner, for example, maybe feels so bad about themselves that they can't tolerate a difference of opinion. They can't tolerate you really shining and looking great. They can't tolerate different ideas. And so rather than work on what that stirs up in them, what happens is people become bullies, they become controlling, they become, even abusive in worst case scenarios. So, to be a person who's struggling with big degrees of narcissism is actually to be a really vulnerable person, but to be so armored on the outside that people often don't see it. But it's like you seem tough, but your partner actually has a really soft underbelly. I mean, the bind is that you can't necessarily lean into that if all you're hitting is a wall, right? But let's not forget what happens to narcissists in the myth. I mean, first of all, the prophets caution his parents that if he does not work on coming to know himself internally, he'll actually grow old. And we know in the myth that Nemesis, another god, is so angry at Narcissus for the impact that he has on Echo that he curses him, and Narcissus casts a glance at his reflection in a pool of water and falls so utterly in love with himself that he becomes entrapped there. Echo calling out to him forever, never being heard, Narcissus staring at his reflection, never seeing all the world, the love, and everything around him that is there. And ultimately just going to his grave that way, going down into the underworld, and still to this day, as the myth has it, staring at his reflection all alone. It's a really sad story. So I don't think the question really is your partner a narcissist? I think the question is one of degrees. I think the question is, how narcissistic is your partner, and what type of narcissism is it? Is it a healthy narcissism that you're dealing with, where somebody's really working from a place of trying to build their self-esteem, or is it defended? And then it's a question of extent. How much damage has it caused? How long have you been dealing with it? When you try to talk to your partner about it, are they able to validate you at all? Are they willing to work on this and make changes? The last thing I want to say, and I think this is also a provocative thing to say, is I want to say that it's important for all of us in relationship to be looking at our own narcissism, even when we're involved with someone who's highly narcissistic. That when you're with somebody who doesn't see you and who doesn't hear you and who doesn't validate you and talk to you, it's a really normal thing to actually become highly focused on your own pain. Why wouldn't you be? Nobody else is. But that is an entrapment in itself. That's a hell in its own way. And it's not, for most of us, I think, a tenable way to live long term. In the end, it's really important to remember that these types of wounds, narcissistic injuries, they often come from trauma that we've experienced, that your partner has experienced in childhood and throughout their life. And they're ways of defending oneself that at one time made sense. Unfortunately, they can really skew things for people. I think if you're in a relationship with somebody, and this is what you're dealing with, you have to ask yourself, are they doing the best they can? Because oftentimes when you really sit with that question, if you come to, yeah, they're doing the best they can, but it's not good enough, then the work is going to be on, one, you have to figure out how to see yourself. You have to figure out how to not become echo. And two, grappling with the grief that comes with realizing that and the implications of it, which may even include taking space from your partner or letting the relationship go. You know, in the end, none of this stuff is black and white. We live in a society that wants to make it so. We live in a society that wants me to do a 2-minute video about this, and it's complex. I can't. It's important to remember there's no easy answer. It's important to be gentle with yourself and have compassion for you and your partner, and to be kind and to set healthy boundaries. And if nothing else, if you're dealing with this, I would encourage you to seek the help of a seasoned couples therapist, somebody who's trained in a leading evidence-informed model, Gottman method couples therapy, emotionally focused couples therapy, and the psychobiological approach to couples therapy, which is called PACT, P-A-C-T. Those models are fantastic, and they can help you figure out what to do and work through this. Thanks for listening.